Welcome back to another episode of the Brawn Body Health and Fitness Podcast. Joining me today is Scott Stansbury. Scott is an athletic trainer and he is a rehabilitation coordinator for an MLB team. And today, Scott and I are going to be discussing the importance of collaboration as it relates to the care of athletes and really across all populations of rehab, sports performance, and so on that way. So really great episode covering some very important things that I feel are not discussed enough. I really appreciate Scott coming on and the time he gave us today, and I know you're going to love this. For more on Scott, be sure to check out his Twitter and Instagram in the link below. And while you're there, be sure to give our friends at Isophit a follow. Isophit is sponsoring season 5 of the podcast, and I really appreciate them. They're my go-to for all things isometric strength training. Enjoy. Scott, welcome to the podcast. I'm super excited to work with you today. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, Dan, thanks a lot for having me on. I'm really excited to be here.
For people who might not be familiar with you, or maybe they haven't heard of the Baltimore Orioles before, would you mind filling them in a little bit about who you are and how you've gotten into this amazing role that you're currently serving in?
So I grew up in Maryland. I lived about 45 minutes or so outside of the Baltimore area and grew up an O's fan my entire life. Baseball's kind of always been my sport. So, but got into athletic training in the late 90s in high school. And kind of once I got into college, that was kind of the thing I wanted to do. And so got into that athletic training program at Salisbury University, which at the time had a fantastic athletic training program and undergraduate. Yeah, just kind of went from there. You know, I had opportunity to go to Villanova and be a graduate assistant there once I was certified and got my master's up there. Ended up staying there 2 years full time, which was great. Really enjoyed my time in Philadelphia. But had an opportunity in 2007 to head out to Notre Dame and become the baseball athletic trainer out there. Spent 14 seasons out there, which was phenomenal. Just a great place to work, great people. Really had no reason to leave that place, to be honest with you. But there was one reason, and it was a career goal for me to return to Salisbury and become the head athletic trainer, and had that opportunity in summer of 21. And so we left there, moved back east, which was great for a few months. And November of 21, you know, I had the opportunity, it was presented to me to be the medical coordinator for the Baltimore Orioles. Kind of a lifelong dream job that I didn't know I wanted. But ultimately, I mean, I think this has been, you know, a great move for me and my family. But yeah, I got an opportunity to do that in 21, and we moved here to Florida in 22, right after the new year in 22, January of 22, and kind of been rolling since then. So
yeah, that's absolutely incredible. And I love that, you know, you grew up an Orioles fan and you ended up working for the Orioles at the end here. So it's kind of cool how you kind of have that, you know, that childhood dream, so to speak, and now you're living it in a way. So
yeah, it's just really interesting because, you know, for me, you know, when I was in college, I had this kind of thought that I wanted to do baseball and professional baseball. But the more I got into it and understood it in college, I realized at the time, my life, that wasn't for me at that moment in my life. You know, the lifestyle and the grind that is required of our minor league athletic trainers is something that, you know, I think a lot of people underestimate quite a bit, the stuff that they're responsible for. I'm kind of glad it worked out the way it did. And so to have this opportunity at 40 plus years old, it is really, you know, humbling to me because, you know, a 20-year-old me would not have expected 40-year-old me to have this opportunity in front of him. And it's just been a great opportunity. And I've learned so much in my first 2 seasons, way more than I thought I would know about professional baseball and professional sports. And being on the fan side of it for so long, you think you know a lot about how things operate. But when you get on the other side of it, it's so different in so many ways. But it's all a learning experience. And I think that's the unique part about, you know, sports medicine is we're always constantly learning something new. And so I get that opportunity every single day.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. And there's something, at least in my experience, I found there's something very rewarding about constantly learning something new and constantly evolving in what you do on the day to day. I feel like, at least for myself, I would get very tired of a job that stayed stagnant all the time. So there's something about that constant change that's just really attractive as a career goes. And it sounds like you're kind of living that right now. For people who might not be familiar with what you do as, a medical director for an MLB team, would you mind filling them in a little bit about what that looks like?
Yeah, it's kind of, I mean, it's hard to describe, but it's also kind of easy to describe because, I kind of have my hand in every bit of medical care that goes on for our minor league athletes, our minor league players, from their physical when they're drafted or signed, all the way to basically until they're, released or retired or whatever. I'm kind of involved in every little niche of that. And some days, it's coordinating, as I said, coordinating physicals, whether that's here in Sarasota, whether that's somewhere up north in Baltimore, if we sign a player and they basically go right to the team that they're affiliated, they're going to be on. So figuring that out. So I coordinate that pretty much every single day. Going beyond that, some of my role includes kind of oversight of the rehab and not necessarily the treatment, but just making sure that all of our players, if they are injured and we're treating them, are they making their marks, on a weekly, daily basis to get back to full activity? Because ultimately, all these players are employees of this organization, and we're responsible for getting them back to work, right? So that's my responsibility. It kind of falls on me. So I'm having oversight of what they're doing on the day-to-day basis. The unique part about our department, I would say, is, we give our staff on the medical side, the day-to-day staff, we give them all the autonomy to treat how they want to treat. There isn't a cookie cutter approach to, hey, this is how the Orioles treat name the injury. This is like, hey, what's your experience with treating this? Okay, great. And if you get stuck, you have 11 other people in the organization, in the sports medicine department, that you can rely on to help you kind of get out of that piece. So that's my job, is to kind of help facilitate that, and make sure that all of our athletes are getting, top-notch care. As I said, from the time that they sign their contract, their first contract, all the way up until their release or their retirement, from the game, or they become a free agent and they move on to a different team. It's really a unique job, unique role, and every team across the league does it a little differently in how they handle it. Some teams have, multiple coordinators, and it might be we have an international coordinator, so his responsibility is to the international side. Mine is to our minor league side here in the States, are US based, but other teams may have just an athletic training coordinator who's responsible for just the athletic trainers. And then they may have somebody else that's responsible for like the administrative part. So I'm kind of a mix of both. I'm lucky enough to have an assistant coordinator who kind of helps me. And we kind of delineate our roles specifically for our staff and what works for us in our department. And it works out really well for us on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, that's awesome. And when you say it like that, it sounds like such a simple, easy thing. But when you get into it, I'm sure it's anything but, because, you're coordinating with athletes in addition to physicians and team doctors, PTs and ATs across the country that are working with your athletes. I know you guys probably have a sports science, strength and conditioning, sports psychology. You've probably got, I would assume, at least 50 to 100 people involved in every single athlete on the day-to-day. So it gets to be a lot when you multiply that by the entire minor league organization of a single team.
Yeah. We have a lot of people. I think our minor league staff is close to 200 total people, and that includes coaches and coordinators and field coordinators and all those sorts of things. But when it comes down to it, our core group of sports performance, put that under the umbrella of sports performance. Our medical staff, we have a slate of now 12 athletic trainers, including myself. And then we have a physical therapist, athletic trainers included in that, but then we have 6 other athletic trainers that help with our affiliates. So that's 18 people right there, under this group that are dealing with these players at some point on an everyday basis. And then strength and conditioning is pretty equal to that. I think there are about 10 or so, if I recall specifically their number. But then you have kind of a nutrition area. You do have, as you were saying, sports psychology or mental performance, mental performance coach. So we have a lot of people that we're constantly working with every single day. And I got to be honest, like I've never worked with a more cohesive group in terms of being on the same page and having these principles that our player development group kind of works off of. We're all geared towards those specific principles. And so everything that we do kind of is geared towards those principles. And so it does help to be on the same page with that group, in that regard, because like I said, everything that we're doing is based on those principles for each player. It's
Right.
not, and it is very individualized. As I said, it's not, it's not cookie cutter by any means. Every player is different. Every situation is different.
Right. But you're all working together for the same common goal at the end of the day. And that's
Yeah.
something that I find very unique amongst high level sports is, you have a team of, as you mentioned, 100, 200 individuals all working together on common goals for athletes. In the private sector, we try to do the best we can to provide that same experience. But, if I'm the PT working with an athlete, I'm lucky to get to connect with their coach and their strength coach, like 2 or 3 people involved in the picture. A lot of times it ends up kind of getting piecemeal, but I would love to kind of take that same kind of cohesive team-based approach and apply it to the outpatient rehab. As I've kind of alluded to, there's some challenges to that. And I'd imagine that it's not always sunshine and rainbows working with high level athletes as well. Has there ever been any kind of challenges that you've faced, coordinating rehab or working from a rehab standpoint with high level baseball players? And, how do you kind of go about addressing those challenges and kind of overcoming them to make sure that everyone kind of stays on the same end goal, same pace?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think our challenges are probably very similar to a lot of people in sports medicine. Whether that's a new physician in a new group that you're working with that maybe you've never worked with before, at which we've had experience with that. There may be a situation where it's an injury that you've never really seen before, or never really at least worked with before. You've heard about it, you read it in the textbook, but you never seen it in person until now. So different things like that. I think the biggest key for us is communication amongst that group that I was talking about earlier. And just making sure that everyone that needs to know what's going on is kept in the loop. And I think that's the hardest part of my job is keeping in mind, like, constantly who needs to know what when. And making sure those people know that. And so, that's a constant thing for me. I'll send a text message we use Slack. So like use a Slack message real quick to send something about a player. I realize 5 minutes later, I forgot to include someone. So you got to kind of circle back and, let them know and keep them in the loop as well. But so those are the challenges I think that we face. I think sometimes too is, we deal with some international players and they're not as employees, they're not in the States year round because of their visa situation and other things. And so, having to coordinate therapy and care for them in their home country is not always easy as well. And so, having a plan kind of preemptively addressing those things before this player, if this player's leaving on a certain day, being able to prepare for that and whether that's give them a home program and have them go through that with our therapist before they go, or it's coordinating some sort of therapy in their home country. We try to stay ahead of that a little bit. And then in addition to that, kind of tagging up with that is on the front office side, like we have to know kind of the dates and things. So they like to know, and that kind of gets us prepared. And we don't wait till the last minute because a lot of times we have to prepare in other ways, travel and all those sorts of things. And so constantly communicating with the people that we need to in regards to each situation is really important. And just being on the same goal, right? Well, the same goal is what is best for the player. And if it means the player has to stay in the States a little longer, well, there's ways that we can go about doing that. If there's ways where it's, hey, this player is served better by going home, then there's ways to do that. And that goes for players in the States too. It may be a situation where maybe their therapy at our complex may be better than going to a clinic offsite. Although we do send a lot of guys offsite in the off season, it's quite honestly near impossible to do that and keep everybody here, during the off season. So, we all need a break too at times, right? So it's very important that we have that communication. And then kind of beyond that, the communication with those offsite folks, if it's at home, if it's in a different country, or it's here in the States, and just having that open line of communication. And that's, again, that kind of falls under my domain of, establishing that first contact with the therapist or the clinic, and then saying, okay, hey, here are the expectations. This is our player. This is what we expect back. Like, we're sending him to you. You have the autonomy to treat as you see fit, but here's let's say our post-op protocol for whatever injury it may be. If it's a surgery, most likely, but you have the autonomy to treat. The only thing we ask is constant, communication back, progress notes on a weekly basis, or phone calls, or both a lot of times. So it's just opening up those lines of communication. And as I said, for me, it's facilitating those things. It doesn't all fall on me. I'm not the lone person doing it. I have my minor league staff athletic trainers that may be following a player that maybe isn't a post-surgical, but maybe we're just sending him to therapy to, a maintenance type of thing for a bum shoulder or something that, we're just trying to keep him going in the off season, or get him ready for the spring. Right. So it's a lot of moving parts, I guess you could say, but it's just constant communication is probably the one, key to facing a lot of these challenges that we find.
It's interesting to me because I hear that brought up from time to time from individuals such as yourself. And it's crazy to me that is not the standard everywhere, right? Like, how come we don't expect PTs to communicate with doctors on the regular? How come that's not the standard? How come it's not the standard for ATs and PTs to work together? Like, where along the lines, and maybe I'm not old enough to have looked back and seen when it started to happen, where along the lines did we get misguided to think that we're all outlaws and we only treat on our own and we don't work with anyone else? I've found, at least for myself, and again, I'm a little younger, I really don't know everything. And there's some things that, walk in the clinic and I'm just like, well, I've never seen that before. Like, I'm currently rehabbing my first ACL repair, not reconstruction, repair. So that was kind of a little twist. And it's just interesting to me that the concept of communication is not globally practiced as much. Because as you mentioned, this is kind of one of the keys, I feel like, for you guys to be successful from a rehab team standpoint. I mean, if you're sending a guy off site and you don't know how they're doing, and they come back 4 months later and they're nowhere close to where they need to be, it's kind of a problem for you guys. So I guess I don't quite grasp why this is not being practiced more widely, across the board in the country.
Yeah, it's interesting because I totally kind of understand and see what you're talking about, and I've seen what you're talking about, in previous, jobs and stops that I've been at, where communication is okay, it's good enough, but maybe it's not quite, as you said, the standard that we have at this level. I do think, a lot of times people ask me, like, what's the difference between like the collegiate setting and the pro setting? And, the one of the biggest differences for me is that these players are assets to the organization. And maybe that's the difference, is we don't see, a John Smith that comes into the clinic for a knee replacement as an asset to his family or to his work or whatever. Whereas, with these guys, they're an asset to the organization. There's an investment there that the team is put in. And now we're asking we need a return on that investment, right? We need a performance on the field. We need success on the field. And so I don't know, maybe it's something like that. Maybe it's that we don't, we don't see it that way. But the other thing too, and you mentioned it, kind of everyone kind of doing their thing. And one thing that was really, I talked about those principles earlier in our player development. And one reason why those principles have been established is to eliminate that silo like feel. And it's not perfect. And as you said, it's not all sunshine and rainbows, and we're not perfect. And I don't pretend that everything is great, because there are good days and there are bad days, but we do try our best to eliminate those silos and to eliminate the thought that, like, okay, these are my guys. I'm going to just stay on my island and do my thing. And when they're ready, I'm going to send them off to strength and conditioning. And when they're ready from there, then they can go back onto the field. Like it has to be a collaborative team approach, because if it's not, there's going to be some sort of hiccup along the way, whether that's in the athletic training room, in the weight room, on the field. There's going to be some kind of hiccup that then costs that player more time, right? And costs the team more time. And so we have to be constantly aware of that, and we're constantly thinking of that thing. And so again, to your initial point, like on the everyday side, I think we lose track of that, right? Because it's kind of like, yeah, you see things that you've never seen before, but you're constantly, it's just kind of like a constant, like you're just rolling them in and out, and it's, you don't think in those kind of terms that we do on a daily basis. Again, I'm not saying we're perfect, but it is that thought process that does keep us working together and working in the same direction.
I like this concept of, you use the term that the players are an asset to the team. You invest in them, they invest in you, you get return on investment. I like that concept a lot. And I guess for me, looking at kind of like the world I'm in and outpatient, we'll call it PT, athletic training, strength and conditioning, I think that we should have a similar mindset to the athletes and individuals that we serve ourselves. And what I mean by that is, we're going to invest a lot of time and energy and effort into that person's rehab, or hopefully we are. And as a result of our labor for them, we're hoping that they get better. And, it's not all our work along that time. A lot of it is the patient's. We're just kind of acting as almost like a guide for them along their journey.
Sure. Yeah.
And our return is, they're going to go out and they're going to tell all their friends and anyone else they know about how good of a job, you just did, because you went above and beyond. When in reality, you didn't really do anything special. You just kind of did your job and kept everyone in the loop and showed them what to do. I think it's a really interesting concept to think of someone in the terms of an asset, like you said, instead of just, this is patient number 12 on the day. How quick can I get them out of here?
Yeah. No, it's interesting that you bring that up, because when I took this job, one thing that I noticed, or that I kind of heard rumblings about, was guys, it was a very hard sell to get guys to come down here for rehab. If a guy is going to be on the injured list for a period of time, extended period of time, their argument's always, well, why can't I stay with the affiliate? Well, you're on the road, you're in a training room that's the size of the room I'm in right now. And you're not going to have the time. People can't dedicate the time to you when they're dealing with 28 or 25 other players that are healthy, that need to stay on the field. So it was a hard sell to get guys to come to Florida. And one thing that we really, really have stressed and tried is getting guys to come here and saying, hey, look, you're going to come here and you're going to get better. To me, right, that's an investment. Like I'm trying to get them to buy in, right? They have to buy into what we're doing, in our thought process. And younger players, everyone kind of has gone to their guy and went in college and high school. And so we have to get them to buy into what we're doing in our programming. Once we do that, now I get a top round draft pick, say, that has to rehab an injury here, and then he goes back healthy. and his teammate that he shares a lot, that he's next to the locker in, has an injury 2 weeks later, and we have to have that conversation with him about coming back down here. That conversation goes a lot easier when I can call up that other player and say, hey, can you talk to so-and-so, and just let them know. Again, not tooting our own horn, just saying like, hey, look, can you tell them, like, help us to get them to buy in to what they're doing. So to your earlier point about getting people to go out and to their friends and family and say, hey, Dan did a great job of my knee rehab. Like, go to him if you're, if you got an ankle or a shoulder or whatever, like he'll get you right. Like, we kind of do the same thing. And again, it's that buy-in, it's that investment. Like, we're going to invest time in you. I'm going to call every player that gets hurt that I know we want to bring down here and have a conversation with them. And it's not, hey, you're coming down and that's the end of it. It's, let's have a conversation about it. And ultimately we get to the point of like, do you want to get better? Yes. Okay, here's the steps that we need to do to take that or to get there. And once you get them to buy into that, it's smooth sailing for us. Like, again, good days and bad days are rehab for them, but it's smooth sailing in terms of let's just get you here and let's give us a chance to get you better, and we'll get you better. And so getting them to buy in is getting your patients to buy in, getting your team to buy in, is really important. And I think that's a key to what we do in sports medicine every day. Is you have to get people to trust you, to buy in to what you're doing. Like you get that, it's smooth sailing to me.
Well, you're treating people like people. You're not treating them like, this might come out wrong, but stick with me for a second. You're not treating the athlete like the superstar athlete on the field and taking Instagram pictures with them and posting every exercise all over social media and asking for autographs. You're treating them like a person. You're talking with them. You're figuring out what they need, where they want to get to. You're giving them a realistic outline of how they can get there and what they need to do. And you're not, beating around the bush with anything. And I think in today's day and age, for some reason, that is a lost concept in the world of rehab. We have lost touch with the ability to sit down and have a conversation with someone and actually talk with them like a person. And instead, we're just so focused on, the athlete, the sports, the high level stuff. To give an example, like if I've got someone who's got recurrent instability, I don't care what joint it is, my goal with them after I sit down and talk with them is probably going to be to stop that from happening before it happens again. I'm probably not going to jump right to, return to sport drills when we haven't even addressed the basic level stuff. Even though the return to sport drills, they look a lot better on social media. No one posts the straight leg raise on Instagram, but the straight leg raise sometimes is, a great starting spot for people. So I think there's a lot of value in being able to sit down and actually have a good conversation with the athlete in front of you and master that communication, not just between providers and practitioners, but also the person sitting in front of you. And I think in the world of sports rehabilitation or whatever you want to call it, that's often extremely lost.
Yeah. I think, for us, we have the benefit of time that is really good. And again, you want to talk about differences from collegiate to pro. For me is, we have time, we're not trying to get a guy back, for next weekend's series against the conference rival. Like we're trying to get this guy back because, hey, we got 140 game minor league season to play. And we're in game 25. Like we got 100 plus to go. Like we got plenty of time here. And so we have that time to sit down with him. We take a day, we try to take a day at least in the beginning and have a conversation with them. Kind of, what are your goals? And these are things that have generated over these last 2 years. Is like we've tried to improve ourselves each year by what can we do better, right? What can we do better? And establishing goals with players is one of those things. So we take some time, we sit down. What are your goals? What do you want to get out of this? Well, I want to get back. Well, okay, that's the obvious goal. But like let's talk about this. Do you want this to constantly be a thing? And the way that we go about those conversations is what ultimately gets to is, we dig a little deeper unintentionally. We dig a little deeper and we find out, well, this has been a hamstring issue since my freshman year of college, and it's just kind of been nagging, but I deal with it and well, let's fix that. Let's go through, let's get that figured out. So we have those conversations. And again, I think, as you're saying, like, that concept is a little lost, I think, because in the collegiate setting, but also in the private sector, because you don't have that time, so to speak. Like, I can't, if I'm in an outpatient clinic treating someone, or you're in an outpatient clinic treating someone, like, your time is valuable, their time is valuable. They're taking an hour out of their day, maybe they're taking their lunch to come do therapy. You're taking an hour out of your day to work with that particular individual, but you, as you said, you got patient number 12 coming in the door, and you started at 7 o'clock in the morning. You don't have the time to sit down and really have those conversations. So I think, if we can find ways, if people can find ways to work those conversations in, and it may not be this isolated conversation that we're talking about, like where I'm just one-on-one and I'm sitting in front of you, sitting at the table, at the treatment table, right? Like, you may be treating, as you're saying, you may be having them do straight leg raises. Take the time to have a conversation then about, their goals, and use that time to dig a little deeper and find out, what their goals are, find out a little bit about that patient. And that's what we try to do. We try to utilize our time to, when they are in there, this is their job, this is what they're getting paid. They're getting paid to come in and do rehab. What are we going to do during that time? It's 2 hours, 2.5, 3 hours out of their day, including the wave room. And maybe if they're brand new surgery, and, well, okay, what are they doing the rest of their day? I don't really know. But I want to make sure that 2 or 3 hours that they're in the building, or 4, whatever it is, that's the most valuable time to them, and most valuable time to us. And so if we can learn a little bit about them, learn a little bit more about their history. There are guys in our organization that I have not ever worked with yet, or talked to. I shouldn't say talked to, but like guys that I haven't worked with yet, or haven't been to Sarasota because they just haven't been hurt. And that's great. Like, we want that to be the case. But I do make it a point to, when I go out and visit the affiliates and things like that, like, to open up those communications. Like, see a guy that, hey, I saw him in spring training, and the next time I saw him was in May when I went and visited an affiliate. Well, that's 2 months later. Just, hey, how's it going? And once they know you care, and I hear this, and it's very cliche, and you've probably heard it before, but once your patient knows that you care, they're going to care how much you know. And so if you can show them that you care a little bit about what they're doing and who they are as a person, and not just the superstar, or just not just the minor league player or professional baseball player. Once they know that you care about them as a person, it's really easy. And so I think you can apply that to the everyday clinics as well. Like, once your patients know you see them as a person, and not just another number coming through the clinic, you're going to have much better success in terms of the rehab, in terms of buy-in, all that kind of stuff.
Definitely. I think one of the best ways to do it, you already mentioned it, but sit down and ask people regularly what their goals are, right? Give them autonomy back. You've mentioned post-surgical patients a few times here. That's a great case of someone who has no autonomy anymore, right? You're being told when you can do simple things like, hey, now you can start to lift your arm again, or now you can start to put weight on your leg again. Like, talk about losing total control of your life. So if you can take control over some of those little things like daily goals or weekly goals, that at least starts to give you some empowerment back, instead of just being told what to do all the time by your doctor, your trainer, your therapist, and so on that way. So I love that approach, and I can't echo that enough. As we're talking here, I realize this has been great to give a lot of insight and information for, clinicians, whether they're in a setting like you are or a setting like I am. But you've kind of had this unique background where you worked in the college sector, and now you're working at the professional sector. And I've had conversations with people across the country that have, expressed different issues that they find within the college sector, as far as, AT, PT, strength and conditioning goes. I try, and I'm not always perfect at this by any means, but I try not to throw stones at glass houses. But for you, if you look at where you are today and what's working for you guys with the Orioles, what's worked for you personally, and where you were in the past from a collegiate setting, is there anything that you think could be done better from a collegiate setting, or what kind of advice would you offer to those in the high school or college sector from a rehabilitation standpoint?
That's a good question. You know, I think about this probably more now than I did before, in terms of if I could tell myself 15, 16 years ago when I started at Notre Dame, give them give that person some key points, right? I think the one thing that is really important is just establishing good quality relationships, whether it's your coaching staff, your staff that you work with in your clinic, and good working relationships. You know, you're not going to agree with everyone all the time. You guys all, like, everyone has to work for a common goal. If you're in a clinic and there's 5 therapists in there, your goals are, okay, we've got to continue this business. We've got to keep this business going, right? How do we do that? Well, we got to get more clientele, right? So we have to, that's our common goal. But our goal is to get people better. We get people better. They tell other people, we get more clientele, right? And that's how, like, I see that. At the collegiate side, for me, it was, and I wish I would have known this sooner, or at least taken the reins a little bit sooner, getting a handle on the players that we were recruiting or that we knew we were going to sign. Because a lot of times early on, we'd get guys that we signed and they would come to Notre Dame, they'd commit, they'd come in as freshmen. And now all of a sudden I'm having to get all their medical histories, and I'm finding out that this player had an unstable shoulder for a majority of his high school career. Well, you and I both know that's probably not going to just all of a sudden be stable now that he's in college. So, and the volume's going to tick up and all those sorts of things. So for me, it was take control of not necessarily what we're doing on the recruiting side, but just have a better handle on what we're doing medically for these recruits. And we have to do it within the rules that the NCAA, puts out for medicals and recruiting and all that kind of stuff. But just having an idea of what their medical history was like a huge piece for me. And I started to do it on the back end of my time at Notre Dame. And it made things so much easier those last couple of years, just knowing, okay, we got this guy coming in as a freshman. We know we have to address this issue when he gets here, but he's been addressing it for the last 3 years. So just in that moment, okay, what resources do I have here that I can use, whether it's my therapist, our physical therapist, athletic trainers that were on our staff, and we had 3 at Notre Dame, which was phenomenal, and we would use them constantly, or what resources outside of the Notre Dame campus did I need to use, right? And so those were really important things that I thought we needed to do a good job of. And then for us, like on the pro side, at this point, like, again, I'm still kind of learning every day. So it's like, if I learn something new, it's like, okay, well, I'll keep that in the back of my mind for next year. If it's, related to a physical or related to something, you kind of keep these little nuggets in your brain as you learn things. But yeah, I think just getting, to the extent that you can do it, just getting as much information ahead of time on a patient or a player can be really helpful in eliminating some of these issues and navigating some of these challenges as you continue to work towards that common goal, whether it's at the clinic and continuing to build that business, or to have a successful team on the field at the collegiate level, or have a healthy team on the field. We don't have, then that was the hard part at the collegiate level too, was we didn't have a system below us that we could fill players in if guys got hurt. So it was like, guy gets hurt, okay, next man up, but then there is no next man up after that. So you got to make sure that player stays healthy, and you're working to keep that other player healthy. So I think those are some of the things that I've found in my experience.
I love your point on, prevention and assessing things early. And I find that that's one of those things that it requires a little bit of work to do up front, but if you can implement it appropriately, it can actually save you a lot later on in the game, later on in the picture. And what I mean by that is, hey, look at people on the day-to-day, see how they present, see how they're showing up to you. And if you start to notice little things, little changes, little trends that just seem off, then try and nip it early instead of letting it go unchecked, because that's eventually going to compound and develop into something, could potentially develop into something far worse. I was just going to say, Dan, that's a really good point. And I,
that's one thing that we do a great job of. I will say our therapist does a phenomenal job of, when he comes in, he kind of identifies those problems that more or less like led to whatever issue that we're treating a player for, right? And he tries to find the cause of the cause, as one of my professors once told me. The cause of their pain is a sore shoulder, but why is their shoulder sore? Is it because their scapulas are super weak? They're winging scapulas and they don't have enough stability. Like all those things like that we can identify early. And so we try to do that as much as possible. And I, again, as a younger athletic trainer, wish I would have known more back then, like if I can address those things a little sooner, maybe we don't have as many arm injuries at the collegiate level as we did in my first couple of years. And so like once I started to implement an arm care program, things changed a little bit. Worked with a pitching coach, things changed a little bit. Like just having those, again, goes back to communication, just having those conversations. But yeah, we just try to identify those little things that we can implement and start to work on early, safely. And once we do that, again, smooth sailing for us. Like it saves us a lot of time on the back end in terms of therapy and cueing them. Because once they get it, all of our patients, all of our players are smart. They're not, and the same goes for outpatient clinics and collegiate. Like these people are not, they know, we have Google now, we have everything that they can look up. So they're constantly looking at these things too. And we have to kind of stay a step ahead of that. And so by trying to nip some of these things early, it does save us time on the back end. Like you get better, you feel better. Now if I'm feeling better, I'm not going through my phone to look up, well, why is my shoulder still sore after 6 weeks of therapy? I don't have to look that up as a patient. So that's kind of how I see it.
As you were mentioning there as well, sometimes it's, a great fit in the sense of, you start talking with someone, you start looking at someone and you realize, hey, this is just a musculoskeletal thing. And I'm going to give them some exercises. Maybe we do some different manual work, whatever it is, and things get better. But by the same token, if you've done everything we've talked about to this point, and you've established good communication and good collaboration between your rehab team, and you establish good rapport with the person sitting in front of you, then when you do that, you might find it's not something that you're meant to be working on or treating, but you can refer it out nice, quick, and easy. What I mean by that is, yeah, maybe they have weak scapula, maybe their rotator cuff on their throwing shoulder is super weak. But you look back at your notes and it was really strong when you saw them initially, and they've been doing all their exercises. So maybe it's not a sheer strength thing. Maybe it's the fact that, hey, now they're sleeping 3-4 hours a night and they're having some personal stuff going on because, athletes aren't just athletes, they're people too. And they have relationships and dogs and finances and all this other stuff. And sometimes that causes some stress and spills over into what you see from a physical side. So I think it's super important to kind of, as we've talked here, not just, stop at, well, it's weak, so I just need to load it more. Actually take, the additional minute, dig a little deeper. It's not going to take you long, but if you can find out that little additional information and then send them to someone in your own team that can help out, I think that's incredibly valuable. And again, what better way to show you care to the person sitting in front of you than literally taking that additional 30 seconds, to find out that little extra info and then going above and beyond to make sure they get what they need to get their issues taken care of.
Yeah, no, I think you make a great point. And as you said, like everyone has their own things that they're dealing with. And we try to be mindful of that as much as we can. And, again, it doesn't take long, but just having those conversations by the treatment table, and kind of getting the feel for what somebody is working with or dealing with on a daily basis that's not related to their work, right? And when I say work, I mean baseball, for in our case, baseball. It does go a long way in treating the whole person and what's best for the player. Some days guys just need a day, it's just like a guy that's playing every day. Sometimes they just need a day off. They might be in a slump, or they might be like, They just need a day off. And so having the ability to do that, hey, today's going to be we call it a spa day. Today's going to be a spa day, kind of get feel good stuff and get you going, and get you on your way. And a lot of times it's just that little mental reset for them to kind of come back the next day and get going again. And, but again, they may just need that day, they may, hey, I can only give you an hour today. Okay. Well, how can we maximize that hour? Is what that comes down to. And again, it may just be a spa day, as we call it, where it's, hey, just come in, feel good stuff and be on your way and go take care of what you need to take care of. So yeah, just being mindful of those things is really important in what we do every day.
Scott, when I've been doing the podcast for about 4 years now, and probably about halfway through, I started chatting with this guy named Derek Millander with the Cavaliers, and we had him on the podcast. And recently I was catching up with him, and he was telling me about this question that he used to ask people all the time. And essentially, he always wanted to know, when someone's successful, what was the cost to their success? Because everyone talks about, the glamour and how great life is, but somewhere along the line, something had to be given up to get there. Maybe it was just a little bit of time or sleep or something like that. So for you to get to the level you're at right now with the Baltimore Orioles, what was kind of the opportunity cost to your success to get to this level in career and life?
It's a great question. It kind of circles back to what I started out talking about in kind of my experience. And, when I was a young undergraduate athletic trainer and some of my buddies were doing internships with minor league teams in the summer, and well, that would be really cool. But I saw what the time that was required of them. And I realized that at that time, I didn't really want to invest that in myself. Like I really liked the collegiate setting as much as I did watching baseball games. And I found like I could be really successful on the collegiate side. And so I focused on that, and going to Villanova and then subsequently to Notre Dame, it came to a point in my life, my personal life, where I had to make some decisions. Ultimately, I had to focus on something to kind of get past all the personal things that were going on in my life. I'm grateful for all of this that has happened, because it led me to some of these awesome experiences that I've had. And I didn't even talk about this, but I'll allude to it here a little bit. Having to focus on baseball, being the baseball athletic trainer and helping with football at Notre Dame, which was a phenomenal opportunity, and I loved every minute of it. But I focused on that literally for probably 5-6 years at one point, where it was work. And so the opportunity cost was, I didn't spend a lot of time outside of a small group of friends that I had. I didn't get out. Wasn't doing those sorts of things. Getting home, like going home I loved going home, but I could only be home for probably a week to 10 days at a time in the winter, right after Christmas or right around Christmas, because of football bowl game and then turning right around and starting baseball season. Missed the spring holidays. Summer was like, I had like a week or two of summer, and then I'd have to get back. So missing that time was certainly an opportunity cost, but because I focused so much on being the best baseball athletic trainer I could be, I got an opportunity to be with Team USA Baseball for three years, 3 different years, 2013, 2014, and 2016. 2 of those years, I got to travel internationally to the Netherlands and to Cuba and to Japan with teams. And again, great opportunities. But, that summer in 2014 took away 7.5, 8 weeks of my time where I was with this team for that long. And I love every minute of that experience, but it did take away an entire summer for me that was, again, phenomenal summer, great experience. But it does take away from the family and being able to do things personally, go out and meet people and do all those sorts of things. And so fast forward to now, to have the opportunity to be in this position. I heard something last night, and I'll allude to it because it was really interesting, really poignant for me, kind of resonated with me. Is I'm a huge professional wrestling fan. Most people that know me probably know that, but So I watched, there was a pay-per-view last night and I was watching it, and then they do a press conference at the end, and Triple H, who, if you follow professional wrestling, he's kind of the Vince McMahon now, he kind of runs the show. He kind of opened up this press conference and he talked about 10 years, like it's been 10 years since this guy came back, and he came back last night, and he said, if he goes, I'm not the same person I was 10 years ago. This guy's not the same person that he was 10 years ago, and they had some beef. And he goes, if you're the same person you were 10 years ago, you've messed up along the way somewhere. And so people change, people evolve. And so as I've gotten to focus on that work, I started to shift my thinking, like, okay, Scott, you really need to focus on you now. Like, you really need, like, you've got a great job, you got a great opportunities, like, focus on you. Once I did that, things started to happen. And I'm lucky enough to have a great fiance who is phenomenal. She's supported me every step of the way. She's moved across country twice now with me, from Indiana to Maryland, and then Maryland down here to Florida. But a great family support support system between her family and my family. Focused on work for so long. I didn't focus on myself and in kind of my personal goals, family goals, those sorts of things. Now I have an opportunity to do that. And in this role, I have an opportunity to do that every day. Like, I'm home for dinner. I don't have to, I'm traveling, but I'm not traveling as much. So I've done all that. I did all that during that time at Notre Dame. And that's one thing when I took this job, and one question I asked my eventual boss, I said, hey, look, I don't have any pro experience. Like, you're going to hire a guy that doesn't have any pro experience? He's like, I said, I haven't ridden the bus. I haven't been in the minors. Like, I haven't rode the buses and done all the grunt work. And he goes, yeah, but you have. He goes, you have, because, and again, that resonated with me also, because it was like, he goes, you've been on the buses at the collegiate level, like driving, 5 or 6 hours after a game to get home, and, all those things. And so when he said that, it kind of gave me some solace to know, like, yeah, you've put in your work, you've put in your time. Now you have a really great opportunity here in front of you. And again, as I said in the beginning, kind of a dream job that I never know I wanted, but one that I'm very grateful for and thankful for. And, I couldn't ask for a better way of how it all has come together over the years. And yeah, I think again, if I can give one piece of advice off of that, is like, as much as you want to focus on work for young professionals, and work has to be your focus to be successful. That is 100% true. It's the quality, not the quantity of work that you do. I say that, I use that all the time, quality over quantity. But at the same time, in doing that, you can't lose sight of who you are as a person and focusing on yourself. And it's going to open up so many doors for you. And so I think for me, it was being who I am, being the same person I am every day during that time when I was focused on work. But then once I got that kind of established, then it was time to focus on me and my life goals and my personal goals. And now I have an opportunity to kind of do both and balance both. And people talk about work-life balance. I don't have it all figured out. I'm getting better at it, working at it every single day. But going back probably 10 years, it was more of a work balance than it was a life balance. And so you just kind of evolve and you figure out what works best for you. And everybody's different. Every situation is going to be different, but you got to kind of figure out, it sounds kind of funny and cliche, but like you don't know until you know really how it's all going to play out for you. And you can't expect that it's all going to be, as you mentioned very early on, like sunshine and rainbows. Like it's not always that, but yeah, you just keep, showing up to work every day, be yourself, be who you are as a person, as a clinician, and the success will come if you're able to do that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, Scott. I mean, ultimately, I think it comes down to this. There's a season for everything in life. And there's times when you got to go out and you've got to put in the work to plant. And then there's going to be times when you go out and put in the work to harvest the fruits of your labor. And there's going to be some times in between where you get to kind of let off the gas a little bit. And there's going to be times when things don't go according to plan, and you've kind of got to roll with the punches that come with it. So I think kind of trusting in the flow of the seasons that way, and trusting in the process, but also not shying away from putting in the time and the effort and energy it takes I haven't known you all that long, Scott, but it sounds like the 40-hour work week was not a thing for long. So it's one of those things you have to put in a little bit of time and energy and effort. And ultimately, regardless of what your title was, whether that's where you are now with the Orioles or versus where you just started out at Villanova, it sounds like you were the kind of person to lead without a title. And what I mean by that is maybe you haven't always had the best, like the most experience out of anyone there. And maybe you weren't always the smartest person in the room. I'm never the smartest person in the room, but you did everything you could to provide for those around you, to provide value and do the best job you could day in and day out. And I think that's something that goes, I don't know what the right word is, but it's something that I don't notice as often anymore. And I think if you're someone who really wants to make a difference when you go into work, whether you're a PT, AT, chiro, strength coach, trainer, I don't care. Just show up and do the best you can every single day and serve those around you. And if you do that day in and day out, in 5 years, 10 years, you're going to be unrecognizable. I think that's kind of the not so secret sauce to a great career. Now it's just a matter of put in the work and do it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it right on the head. I mean, being an O's fan and growing up, right? My guy that I idolized as a child was Cal Ripken, and I think, it sounds so cliche, but the guy showed up every single day. Didn't matter what it was, and a lot of people, they see the number, they see the number of games played, and I don't think they realize, that not all of those days was he healthy. Everyone knows that. There were times when he was not healthy and still went out there and played every day. And so I think we can apply that to our own daily things. Like there are going to be days when you're not going to want to go to work for whatever reason, whether it's a personal reason or a physical reason or whatever it might be. But if people are dependent on you and relying on you to be there, you do have to be there. And I'm not the type of person that's gonna show up even when you're sick and on your deathbed. Like, no, there's some reality to it. I'm not a complete like show up whether you're, throwing up everywhere. No, like be smart about it. But we'll work through it. But yeah, just showing up and being who you are every day will serve you as a clinician. For those listening, it will serve you tremendously in the long run. You may not notice, as you said, you may not notice the fruits of your labor early on, but the longer you do it, the more you'll see people start to ask you for advice. And like, hey, I was on a Zoom call with some students through the PBATS, Professional Baseball Athletic Trainer Society, a couple weeks ago. Kind of just led a little breakout room, and I've had 2 students now reach out to me from that, just to ask questions, just to ask about my path and just to talk. And like that to me is that giving back to the younger generation of clinicians that are coming along. And so I'll do the same here. Like, asking questions and asking people questions, like, don't be afraid to ever ask a question. And I think going back to something that you talked about earlier, like, what would I wish I would have known? I wish I would have asked more questions when I was a younger athletic trainer, even though I didn't know it all, like I tried to, if I didn't know, I was going to find out an answer for somebody, whether that was somebody above me, a player that I'm responsible for, parent, whatever it might be. I'm going to find out an answer for you. Yeah, I think just staying in that kind of mindset constantly and constantly just having this, as we call it, our in our player development, a growth mindset. Again, that will serve you tremendously well in your professional and personal life. And I can't talk about that enough, to know that, that's something that will serve people well.
Definitely. I can't echo that point anymore, Scott. It's been a great episode, and I feel like we've covered so many different amazing points thus far as it relates to, the rehab and providing for high-level athletes, all the way up to, what it takes in order to be successful and, achieve a higher level or higher status or whatever you want to call it as a professional. Do you have any kind of closing thoughts or closing remarks or anything we missed today, Scott?
No, I think people just, as a clinician, as you go through your career, one thing that I've constantly kind of hung my hat on is don't forget where you came from. Don't forget who got you there. There are many people in my career that I'm very grateful for who've given me opportunities along the way, whether that's, the reason that I got into athletic training with the old high school football coach that wanted me to come out and be a student manager. And that's how I got into athletic training, or my mentor at Salisbury, or the director that gave me the opportunity at Villanova, or my boss that I got hired with at Notre Dame, or hired by at Notre Dame, or the folks here at the Orioles. At the end of the day, I'm always grateful for all of them, thankful for all of them. And one thing that I do every single day is like, what have I done today to make those people proud of me and proud of what I'm doing? I'm not in it for the accolades and the glamour. I'm in it to make them proud of me and proud of who they, as I say, raised in some ways, right, as a professional. But that being said, everyone knows how they were as a student and what they did as a student to get them to then be a professional, be certified, whatever it might, as an athletic trainer or a physical therapist. You know the grunt work that you had to do, and don't forget, if you do get into leadership positions, what those people below you are doing on a daily basis, because they're the people that they pump you up, right? But you have to pump them up too. You just got to remember what they're doing on an everyday basis. And that's something that I constantly keep in the back of my mind and keep in the, what am I doing every day, to make sure that I always remember where I came from and remember how I got here. Both everyday work and who got me here is just really important.
Definitely. That's great advice, Scott. And I think that's an awesome note to end on. For people who want to find out more about you, or maybe they want to reach out to you, do you have an online presence at all? Or you're probably more of, if I'm dating myself correctly here, like the days of like AIM or Skype? Or...
You might be right there. No, we did have instant messenger way back in the day, back in the collegiate days, but no, you can, I'm on Twitter, but it's not, it's a lot of sports stuff and probably a lot of Orioles stuff, but it's Scott SATC on Twitter. But if anybody, wants to reach out to me or has questions, my email is sstansbury, my first initial, my last name @orioles.com. And I'm always, happy to answer a question of a young clinician or just some advice, if anybody needs advice. So those are really two ways to contact me, and I'm happy to try and help where I can. As I said, try to give back to the younger clinicians that are coming along. And yeah, that's kind of it on the online side.
Yeah, for sure. We'll be sure to link to your Twitter. Well, actually, it's called X now, Scott.
X now. Yeah, I said Twitter. Then I thought about it. I was like, it's not called Twitter anymore, but
we'll be sure to link to that in the description below there. That way, if you want to give Scott a follow and reach out to him, you can do that. Scott, this has been awesome episode today. Really appreciate your time and everything that you shared with us.
Yeah, Dan, thanks so much for having me on, and great to connect with you, and looking forward to my trips up to the Delmarva Peninsula to maybe catch a game with you over at the Shorebirds when I'm in town.